Welcome, everyone, to this session. You are the few, but the brave, who have lasted until the end of the day and of the whole week. So congratulations. It's already a success. Today, to end the policy week, we're going to engage in a debate. And this debate is going to be, what is really the role that citizens can play in the transformation of the energy system? And so we have brought together some great minds around the table to help us explore what do we really mean when we have talked about the role of citizens throughout the week. What are the underlying narratives that is the undercurrent of all these discussions about policy that we've had? What is really at the heart of the matter? And that is what we're going to be engaging in going forwards. So our starting point, and a starting point for many of you perhaps, is that technology alone is not enough. That alone probably has become very clear in these days. And what our point is to say is that the innovation and the support of individuals are key to realizing the changes, even at a systems level. So we begin with an investigation, and just so that we have a common ground to talk about what is actually energy citizenship. You might have had this term defined for you in other sessions, and we're going to provide a slightly different definition right now. And that is that energy citizenship is citizen engagement and participation in the energy transition writ large, and that it has to do with balancing the roles and responsibilities that various actors and stakeholders have in this energy system. And it's about being able to ensure that citizens' needs are and can be accrued to citizens, and that we should be able to tailor their engagement according to these benefits. So this is sort of the broad definition that we're going to be working with and going to be trying to refine going forwards in the hour, a little more than an hour that we have. So another basis for discussion is a joint policy brief. You don't have to have read it in order to engage in this discussion, but it was written by 4 Horizon 2020 projects that all endeavored to define what energy citizenship is. And we've come to a agreement about what needs to be done going forwards about energy citizenship, to define it, to operationalize it, and also really to mobilize it. And what ended up happening in this policy brief is that we defined 3 challenges and 3 pathways that we noticed of why energy citizens, or citizens in general, are resisting change. What is the source of that resistance, and what can we do in order to bring everybody along on the path of transformation? So that's the gist of what the joint policy brief is about, and we're going to be talking about some of the themes that have emerged from this joint policy brief. And as I just mentioned, just to move back a little bit, the key message of this brief is that one actor alone and citizens alone themselves changing their behavior, changing what they do in the households is not going to be enough. It's about change that requires a whole ecosystem to move along with them, right? It's to be able to align the actors within the energy system in order to work together towards the energy transition. And so the challenges, what are these challenges that we're really talking about? The challenges that we're really talking about, after surveying and interviewing 32,000 citizens over a period of 3 years, we tried to pinpoint what are the underlying storylines and narratives that people are telling us as researchers, what is actually going on, what are they really feeling? And it boiled down to these 3 questions that they had, doubts that they had towards the EU, towards all of us who are trying to do something about the energy transition, and they are such. Why should I be the one to change? So this is a matter of fairness. If I have limited resources and you have more resources, and I see my neighbors having more resources, why is it that you're painting me as the energy poor? Why are you targeting energy poverty, actually? Shouldn't you be talking about the rich? So this sense of unfairness of whom you're even talking to is one of the matters of resistance. Secondly, why should I trust what you tell me? There's been a series of changes in our geopolitics, in the pandemic, where the institutions themselves have made mistakes going forwards. We've muddled through, all of us, right? And so if you're not sure what you're doing, why should I follow, especially in terms of inconveniencing myself? So this issue of trust on multiple levels. And the third challenge that we really have is okay, let's say I do trust you, and let's say I do see that I think I should play a part in this. But then, are you really enabling me to do the things you're asking me to do? On the surface, it may seem that I do have the responsibility, but how am I actually given the tools, given the resources to actually go forwards? Is this lip service, or am I really being supported? So these are the key challenges that we're going to be wrestling with going forwards. And I think I will end it there before really going forwards to introducing our very, very illustrious panel, who will be also discussing with us their views on what is the role that citizens can play in the transformation of the energy system. Is it really possible? And before I go forwards, I just like to say that this format is a debate format, which means we're very interested in sort of seeing who's in the room. We want to know what your stance is on what I just said. Can citizens actually make a significant contribution to the transformation of the energy system? And we want to also ask, how open are you willing to change your mind? We asked you that in the beginning, that at the end of the session, we're going to be asking you the same question, just to see how our discussion has really shaped, or whether it's shaped, your opinion. Or we can all stay having the same opinion, but just as a point of curiosity. And so, if you would please look at the question on Slido and enter your, we also want to know where you're coming from. So the first prep question is, which of the following best describes your organization that you come from? Are you academia, business, or industry, NGOs, part of a platform or network, public organization? Just pick one if you're not sure. It could be multiple, I'm sure. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, we have quite a bit of 1 and 2 representation. Lovely. Okay, so this is sort of just our attempt at getting a little bit sense of who's in the room, so that we can also then contextualize what you tell us later on. All right, so it's pretty even mix with a slight more number of people in academia and business. All right, next one. So this is the key question. Citizens can significantly contribute to transforming the energy system in Europe, and this is with or without the help of their government. So you can strongly disagree, agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. All right. We have wonderful. Okay, so we have a, it's still moving a little bit. We have a strong majority of people who do strongly agree that citizens can contribute significantly. Great. So that's our starting point. Our starting point is that most of the people in the room are quite hopeful, actually, about citizens transforming. I guess that's part of the reason why you're here in the room, so we're a bit of a self-selecting crowd. But let's see how then, and let's see what might be some of the doubts that some of us may have for going forward, since it's not 100%, right? Good. All right, let's go forwards then. And so now I would like to ask you, are you willing to change your opinion on this matter? I mean, are you very fixed on the fact that you are believing that this is the right path forward, or do you have some doubts? If you have any doubts at all, then please put yes. If you have no doubts about your opinion, then put no. Okay. We have a pretty sure, but also open crowd, so that's good to know. Great. Okay, we also have people who are, you know, basically the people who say no pressure for us then. You are going to think what you're going to think, so it makes it easy for us. But thank you very much. We will come back to you. We'll come back to you with all of this at the end of our discussion. Good. Thank you so much. Let's go forwards with our panel then. I'll do, we have, you notice that there are two sides of the table, but actually they have mixed opinions, not necessarily organized in such a way. We're going to first start with Arthur Hinch. He is working for the climate policy and energy governance. He is the climate policy and energy governance officer at ICLEI, and he is also, and ICLEI, if you don't know, is the International Council for Local Environmental Initiative, and it's the world's leading network of local and regional governments committed to sustainable development. After that, we'll have Constant Alarcon, and he is C40's head of energy strategy and implementation. And C40, if you don't know, is a global network of nearly 100 mayors of the world's leading cities. And then, following that, we'll have Chris Freitos. He's working for REScoop, representing also the European Federation of Energy Cooperatives. And we'll have online Elena Nikolovska. She is the head of the climate program at Eko-svest. That is a environmental NGO based in North Macedonia. She'll be calling in. We also have Niall Dunphy. He is a senior research fellow in the School of Engineering and Architecture in University College Cork, and is a major contributor of the body of knowledge that's growing on energy citizenship. And last but not least, we have George Zakakis, and he is one of the major forces of this plenary that we have today, and he also works as the head of climate at Holistic, based in Greece. So I will, without further ado, give the floor first to Arthur and his view on the topic of citizens having the role of transforming the energy system. So please go ahead, Arthur. Maybe we can put up his slide. And just one more thing. What we've asked all the panels to do, and we've really given them a hard task, is one takeaway from your point of view about this particular statement. So they're not going to be sharing all the wonderful things they're doing in their organizations, but just presenting one key slide that we've asked them, or one key message that they are going to be talking about.
Okay, so thanks. Yeah, it seems we have to make do with just the ICLEI logo, which is pretty, so I hope that's fine. Anyways, indeed, thanks a lot for the introduction. Indeed, Arthur Hinch at ICLEI Europe. Indeed, we are the European branch of ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability, which is a global network of local and regional governments for sustainability. And well, to answer the question directly, like, do citizens have the agency and can they support the energy transition? Well, the response is yes, yeah, of course they do. I mean, we have the framework in Europe in place that citizens can, if they would like to, participate in the energy transition, can do that via different means, you know, be this engaging in all kinds of different activities, around collective self-consumption, prosumerism, putting PV panels on the roof, but also energy communities, no? Energy cooperatives, renewable energy communities, all kinds of forms. The issue is not so much do citizens want to in general, the question is more do we enable it collectively as a society and as the legislator and as the framework. So that question is a bit more tricky, right? So maybe let's remember that in the current context, and we of course know already for quite a while that citizens can be a part of the energy transition. In the current context, we want to accelerate the development of renewable energy technologies. It needs to be fast. So we are talking about accelerating renewables, accelerating grid deployment, accelerating all of that basically. And there's this lovely new principle in legislation, which is the principle of overriding public interest, which I find very interesting, which is supposed to, of course, help the promotion of renewable energy deployment, well, there where it's deployed, which is often on the local level, very quickly, you know, despite the fact that many citizens, of course, are not even happy with the renewable energy technologies that are being put into their context. And I think this is important to understand that, of course, there are many citizens who want to become part of the energy transition. We also should not forget, and we should not pretend that everybody really wants to do that, right? So the question is, how do you make it attractive for people that are not necessarily convinced by renewables, that it is a good idea. And there's many different forms to do that, right? So, of course, as we will hear from Chris, we'll probably talk about energy communities, the ways in which, people can directly participate in the energy system by having ownership and collective governance over the initiatives. And this is often supported by the public authority. So the public authority here as the trusted intermediary, kind of the supporter of the citizens. And the idea is that even if the energy transition moves ahead very quickly, and we kind of agree that in some cases, when it comes to having kind of too much issues with like projects being sued and being delayed and everything, that principles such as overriding public interest might have some value. We should not forget that we might be in a situation where we have a fast renewable energy transition, but not necessarily a fair one. So that's very important because the issue of NIMBYism is not necessarily getting away. So that's one part. And then the other element is that, well, yes, it's true. Many citizens want to become energy citizens. They want to become active members of the energy transition field. But it's also a reality that not everybody, at the moment, of course, is on the same page here. Not everybody wants to invest the time. So, for instance, an energy community, for instance, is quite a time-intensive effort, right? And it would be interesting to have a conversation around that, but it's probably a very time-intensive effort. And one of our Horizon projects, npower, has actually recently shown that in a very European-wide survey, I think 5,000, 6,000 households were surveyed, the question was asked, like, would you like to become a member of a renewable energy community? And of course, the majority said yes. Right, it's a good idea. Why wouldn't you want to be, part of an energy community and, get a dividend on your investment, or be part of an energy community that lowers the energy bill as part of an energy sharing or collective self-consumption activity? But then when you ask how often do you want to be engaged in the energy community, you get different responses. You get stuff like, well, maybe I want to be engaged on a monthly basis or sometimes even on a quarterly basis. Yeah, so that means somebody needs to do the work. Yeah, if you have an energy community that's created, it means it's a handful of people that are the most active energy citizens, and everybody else, I would argue, is also an energy citizen, but they're maybe not the people who are initiating the initiatives. Now, the question is, what can we do in the long run to make it as easy as possible for people to, make use of their energy citizenship rights without necessarily asking them to invest extreme amounts of their free time, especially if it's people that have other things to do than worry about the energy system or climate change, for that matter. Yeah. So that's that element. And I think here the concept, the trusted important element is the concept of trusted intermediaries. And this will be your public authority, who is ideally in a position to be closest to the citizens. Ideally, the municipality is trusted by the citizens. That depends on the context, but very often it is, and can facilitate the creation of any kind of collective self-consumption scheme, utility bill assistance scheme, energy community, by taking the lead in setting up the energy community. Sometimes it's citizens themselves doing it from grassroots level, but that's not always the case. And a trusted intermediary can also be a private company. It can also be a service provider that provides a service to the citizens, to an energy community, to take care of the energy sharing concept or whatever. So that it becomes easier that those energy citizens that are part of an energy community, for instance, to become active energy citizens without them necessarily having to do all the work themselves. So trusted intermediaries is very important so that we ensure that in the long run we have a fast renewable energy transition, but it's also fair in the sense not that people have access and ownership of the energy transition, but it's also fair that we're not asking people to do all of the work for free, but we're actually enabling them to do as little, to do as much as they want. But the key is to do as much as they want, right? We're supporting them to take. We have others to actually support them. So the question was raised at the beginning. Do we have support by citizens? Yes, we certainly do, Europe as a whole, but we also need to support citizens to become active energy citizens. And I think that's the bottom line, so happy to discuss further.
Thank you so much, Arthur. Very clear. So we have a vote for yes, but there's a gap between intention and action, and there's an important role that trusted intermediaries can play in bridging that gap. So thank you very much. So let's move on to Constant. Thanks.
Thank you, and a second vote for yes on that part, on that side of the table. So I work for C40. We are a mayors-led organization of the world's almost 100 megacities committed to tackle climate change and to deliver a just energy transition. Our member cities have very ambitious plans to decarbonize the energy sector. It's at the heart of their climate action plans that they have to deliver as part of their membership of C40. And residents, city dwellers, do play an important part on meeting the objectives of those climate action plans. Critically as well, the development of the climate action plans did include a very strong inclusivity component, making sure that equity is not only on the outcomes of policies, but also in the actual policy development and design process. So energy citizens really critical for cities to deliver on their own energy and climate targets. But what I want to build on a little bit today is what Arthur started to talk about, the role that cities can play in helping to overcome the three challenges that you highlighted: why me, trust, and what's the enabling framework to support me getting engaged in the energy system. And really the way we see it at C40 is that cities are absolutely essential to enable an easier, a faster, and more meaningful engagement and participation of all in energy systems. They're all the levels of government closest to citizens. They tend to have a high level of trust from their residents compared to other stakeholders, I should say. And really the first benefit that cities' action can bring to the table is bridging the trust gap or the trust issue. And sometimes they go as far as setting up their own municipal utility. We've seen that in Barcelona, in London. It's been a great way to showcase to residents that energy engagement in the energy system can actually be for the benefits of all and actually bring them the benefits that help them to be more engaged. They can also, cities can also provide the means for meaningful engagement from residents. They can give residents the data, the information, the capacity building they need to be able to do this job of spending some of their time, some of their resources into energy system. There's a very long tradition of energy advice points in a number of our cities, whether in Paris, in Milan. There's also a movement to train social workers to be able to engage the most vulnerable residents on energy actions, on energy poverty, kind of helping to bring those two dimensions together, or putting information about renewable energy generation in the hands of residents through things like solar maps. And of course, cities do play a role. I think we're going to hear a lot about community energy schemes today, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but they can support those schemes by leveraging their own municipal assets. And Paris is an example of a city that has offered some of their public roofs to community energy schemes. But we also believe at C40 that citizens can contribute to the energy system's transformation in Europe, but that the involvement of cities is absolutely critical to ensure that this transition is just and is fair and benefits those that need it the most. This is twofold. First, they can ensure a fair distribution of benefits and follow a climate justice principle, and that's the kind of the why me, I think, challenge that can be overcome by this type of action. So the most vulnerable and poorest residents, they're less likely to engage, broadly speaking. They probably don't own their roof, for example. They might not always have good energy data. So there's a missed opportunity to be truly people-led in the energy transition without targeted actions to target the most vulnerable of our residents. Again, a number of cities in Europe that are doing some very interesting work. Lisbon is looking to develop a social solar tariff where the poorest residents can benefit from solar projects that are developed on municipal land through shared collective consumption schemes. An example outside of Europe, but Portland in the US, that has put climate justice at the heart of their climate action plan, is prioritizing vulnerable residents for air conditioning distribution or air conditioning units distribution, which in turn can help people to, obviously survive the worst of the climate crisis, but also give them tools to take part in things like load shifting, for example. And the second role that cities can play to build a fairer transition through citizen engagement is by protecting the most vulnerable from some of the potential adverse impact of the transition. We've seen in some places in California when it comes to the electricity grid, but also in France recently when it comes to the gas grid, that the maintenance cost of those systems can be spread over a shrinking base of consumer, which in turn leads to higher energy prices for those consumers. And those tend to be the people who couldn't afford to install a heat pumps or to install a battery storage system. So making sure that we have a transition plan that is localized, that takes into account the needs of the most vulnerable is the only way that we can ensure that the transition will be truly people-led and will be truly just and fair. So in conclusion, citizen, yes, definitely, absolutely critical. Energy citizenship is at the heart of our city's climate action plan. But in turn, we need to give cities tools and capacity for them to play this kind of trusted advisor role to ensure that the transition is rapid, is just, and is fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Constant. Great. Thank you. And that was a nice follow from the first one, where you actually gave very concrete examples of what a trusted intermediary does. So further building on the first point. Great. Great. So then we move on to Chris. Yep.
Yeah, I think this is on, right? Yeah.
It's on.
Thanks a lot, and thanks to all of you for surviving until now. As been said, it's really the end of the week. I think we're all tired. I really do want to stay for 1 second on the question that you said on the slide. That was, why should I be the one to change? And I think we talked about it as well earlier during lunch. You know, the lingo, I think, in EUSEW as well, is that how are we going to squeeze out the last kilowatt hour from the energy poor households, really, you know, giving them the energy efficient sockets and advice and the appliances and all of that. But we're not, as you said, we're not talking about the rich. You know, we're not talking about the energy decadence or, you know, the luxurious consumption of someone that has 2 pools, 3 SUVs and 1 private jet. And I think really, what the EU election showed is that we need to be bolder, because citizens support strong climate action. We're seeing that in the latest EU barometer, 80% again stated that they support climate action, but they voted for the far right. So clearly, while the point is there, we're not finding the right messages to get to them. I saw today that the Greens in the UK posted their manifesto basically saying, we need to bring back electricity into public ownership. We need to tax the rich so as to fund community energy projects. So we really need to be bolder, guys. I think we need stronger messaging, because just, I think we're kind of getting into these spaces and we're repeating the same slogans of like just transition and all of that. And that's great, but I think we need to be a bit more aggressive. And that's also with the Social Climate Fund, right? I mean, it's great that the emissions trading system it's expanding onto buildings and transport, but really, again, the cost is offloaded by the companies onto the consumers, and now we're just really racking our heads of how we're going to finance it, and not make it into a Gilets jaunes volume 2. Well, tax the rich, and redistribute the money to the people so that they can create the energy communities, they can renovate their houses, and so on. But to bring it a bit more down back to the actual citizens and not to the political economy side of things, I think indeed citizens can engage. I think it's radically realistic to say that, the Belgians, they will be participating in offshore wind parks as of next year. In Greece, more and more communities are starting to receive negative electricity bills. We're really seeing this seismic mosaic of radically realistic solutions. We're seeing these things happen on the ground. I think it's great. And it's not just the small energy sharing projects, really. The biggest cooperative suppliers like Somenergia in Spain, REScoop in France, Ecopower in Belgium, they have 70,000 members. It's really great. And I think that speaks to what you were saying, Arthur, about the time needed to be part of an energy community. I think as an energy community professionalizes, the less and less time you need. It's like a curve. So I think you really need a lot of time in the beginning, and I get it. But then, it really starts becoming much more professionalized. You have working groups, you have a general assembly. So I would not trust a private supplier to do it for me. I would prefer to do it through, like my community and my neighborhood. And that's really where we should be very careful not to call everything an energy community, because that's when you start cannibalizing the enabling frameworks, the grid access, the funding. If funding is supposed to go to energy communities and it ends up going to energy sharing by private suppliers, then you're kind of losing the point. So sure, let's have these different forms, but let's call them what they are. Let's not call everything an energy community. And that's the last thing that I want to make. The last point that I want to make, I think, and it's going to sound shocking coming from someone that works with energy communities, but let's be cautious with how much it has been embraced by the system, including by the Commission. Because at the end of the day, when something is systematized and everyone says it's good, then probably there is some revolutionary element there that's missing. There's something that is probably being co-opted, as with many private suppliers that are doing these energy sharing schemes. So my question is, how do we really ensure that we maintain its revolutionary potential? And that's what I'd like to follow up on in the next intervention, maybe.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. And I like this phrase that you used, radically realistic. I think that's quite interesting to follow up. So what we have next is Elena from, I think she will be joining us from North Macedonia. And maybe it will take a little bit for her to get online, but she will be representing a perspective from the environmental NGOs. Oh, wonderful. Hi, Elena. Nice to see you.
Hi, everyone.
Great. We give the floor to you and to hear what you have to say about what you've seen as citizens, their potential in transforming the energy system.
Yes, so thanks everyone for giving me the opportunity to participate in this panel discussion and for being a part of this policy paper, which I fully agree with. I just wanted to showcase a timeline of all of the documents that enabled sort of the beginning of the energy transformation in North Macedonia, since it's not an easy process in the Western Balkans countries that are very heavily dependent on coal. But it all happened with the adoption of the new energy strategy back in 2019. And it was a very inclusive process that included working groups with a lot of stakeholders and various relevant stakeholders from the country, which I would have to say that it was the first time being done in the country. And it was an energy strategy that had a coal phase out by 2027 in the green scenario. So it gave sort of a signal to all of the stakeholders, but also the international community and the business sector specifically, and the energy sector, of course, that there is a political willingness to begin the energy transformation. And going to 2020, it happened that there was a plan for 100 megawatts photovoltaics constructed on the location of a former coal mine in one of the two coal regions in the country. The construction of the photovoltaic plants have begun, and 10 megawatts are installed. 10 megawatts will be installed, and 50 by 50 will be installed. Is in the pipeline. All of the national climate reporting towards the UNFCCC is also done in a very inclusive way in the country, with the head of the climate sector in the Ministry of Environment consulting all of the relevant stakeholders with working groups and close meetings even with the CSO sector, with the business sector, and also really trying to present and to make everyone realize what is climate change and what is this thing called GHG emission inventory, which no one knows anything about 3 years back. So the draft National Energy and Climate Plan, which is the first time that the energy and the climate sector have been integrated in one single plan document in the country, also was a very inclusive process that had 5 working groups on all of the 5 pillars, and in 4 of the pillars there was involvement of national CSOs that really saw a difference in the process of the drafting and in the end result for the first time, because then you could see that CSOs highlighted some problems problems with implementation that institutions are willing to highlight sometimes. This created ownership of this document for all of the sectors involved, even the non-profit sector. We still don't have a final adopted NECP, but if the final stage follows the draft NECP process, then I think we're good. So leaping a little bit back forward towards the climate action law and strategy and the new draft law on energy and the draft law on renewables, we saw a process of extensive consultations and communications with all of the relevant stakeholders in the country. And of course, again, we see all of these documents are still not adopted, but the end result is we are very happy with the end result, and all of the stakeholders now feel like this document is ready to be implemented, and they will give their full support towards implementation of the measures. So it was a very different process than what happened before, where you see even national CSOs that work on national level having the opportunity to transfer everything that's happening on central level to local CSOs and local communities. And then they have a chance to participate in the process with their comments and give like very simple, very maybe sometimes removing administrative obstacles in one piece of legislation, but that wouldn't normally be even mentioned, or policymakers wouldn't even be aware of this problem if someone from the local communities or CSOs is not there to highlight it. So this unlocked, I just wanted you to see like a timeline of how it's possible to unlock the process of energy transformation in a country that is very heavily reliant on coal, and by giving ownership to all of the relevant stakeholders, not only CSOs. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. That's great. Thanks for giving us a slice of life into multi-level governance in action and having it work. And also, I really appreciate you drawing out the connection between ownership of a document and then later on its success of its implementation and inclusiveness. Because then it's one of the few instances in which I've heard someone talk about inclusiveness as the end and in connection to what we're actually trying to accomplish rather than sort of an ideal in itself. And I really appreciate that perspective you're bringing in. So thank you. So now we move on to a perspective from academia. And so I'll give the floor over to Nel.
Thank you, Bin. So the answer to the question to begin with is yes, but it's complicated. The term energy citizenship has been with us for quite some time. It's, I suppose, what it might mean in practice has been very much, I'm open to interpretation, open to contestation. Even within this week alone, we've heard many different versions of what energy citizenship is or what it might be. It originally meant a more active citizenry within the energy domain, but in what way and how. Different actors within the energy system take that to mean different things. It usually is given a very normative focus. It's used as a proxy of what somebody wants someone else to do. So become an energy citizen, use energy more efficient. Become an energy citizen, time shift your energy use. Become an energy citizen, invest in this or invest in that. So it's very much a, all responsibility. So citizenship, of course, is a combination of rights and responsibilities. That's often forgotten in this discourse. I suppose the concept of energy citizenship is best understood as a social construct. It's a social technical imaginary of the roles that citizens could play in the energy system, might play in the energy system, not necessarily have to play in the energy system. We would contend that there's more than one way of being an energy citizen. So there's more than one flavor of energy citizenship or expression of energy citizenship. That it comprises many multiple, overlapping, interlinked, sometimes contradictory expressions of citizenship. Those who are members of energy cooperatives, that's an expression of energy citizenship. Those who are protesting for climate action, that's also an expression of energy citizenship. Maybe not one that those in power want us to do, but no less valid. So we need to consider all of this. There's a notable classism inherent in many expressions of energy citizenship that are put to the fore by governments, by public agencies, by the energy companies. Some overlap, I suppose, with environmental classism. It can be quite elitist. There's been a tendency in this discourse to focus on active citizenship active participation as being a citizen. So you must become an energy citizenship. We've had elections to our European Parliament. Just over 51% of us voted. I won't ask who in this room voted in the European Parliament elections, but does that mean the other 49% lose their citizenship? No. So this kind of focus only on the obligations, only on you must participate rather than the right to participate is rather exclusionary. It also assumes an agency that many don't have. So in the domestic sphere, we're called on to be active citizens, active consumers, to use our supposedly rational minds, if you believe we are rational creatures, in our purchasing decisions, in our consumption habits, to become more efficient with energy. We're asked to be producers of energy, whether that be as prosumers or as members of energy cooperatives. But all of this assumes a certain level of agency, a certain element of financial resources, educational privilege, expertise, time, intellectual ability, networking, and so forth, that many don't have, and it excludes all of those. So those perspectives are very much excluding a large part of our society. And if energy citizenship is going to be just focused on these economic modes of participation, it's going to exclude large groups of our society. It's going to exclude all those who are out on the streets protesting, calling for more action. Those who are actually probably doing more than anybody to forward the energy transition and to forward decarbonisation. So many are overlooked in this discourse from the margins of society, whether that be economically, socially, geographically. And they often operate outside of existing energy systems, or else they're impacted by the existing energy system. Does that mean that they're not an energy citizen? Somebody who's not plugged into the grid, but that lives next door to an oil refinery, are they not an energy citizen? Do they not have a right to be heard? It's ironic, I suppose, in many ways, that this concept of citizen, and we heard citizen being used time and time again by speakers over the last few days, is being used here, and in such an exclusionary way in many cases. And then when you think about it, maybe it's not, because citizenship itself is very much a container for apportioning privilege. You only need to see that by our Fortress Europe. We go to enter the various countries, and it's EU citizens this way, we're waved on. The rest of the world might get in. Oh, something to look at. I alluded to already, but it's noteworthy just to go back in that not all forms of energy citizenship are equally supported by those with power, by those who make decisions. The traditional system power holders, the government agencies, the energy utilities, they have a marked preference for certain acceptable modes of participation, certain flavors of citizenship, those that don't challenge the status quo, those that fit into their business model. As an aside, it's somewhat ironic that we're expecting the existing energy companies to lead us in this energy transition. Never before has an energy transition been led by the existing. The coal barons of old didn't lead us into oil. You have to expect the oil companies to lead us. So there's a danger that the concept itself is being co-opted. Perhaps maybe it has been co-opted. And that it could mask certain dystopian futures in ways that we might call it energy citizen, but we might end up being energy serfs, that we're tied into contracts that we don't have any power in, we're tied into systems that we don't have any influence in, but that we have all the obligations. So governments and those with power, and that's utilities as well as everyone else, love to shift responsibilities to the individual, that they keep the power. So those who have real power. So to answer the question, yes, citizens can do a lot, and they can be supported to do more, but they can't do it on their own. And what's missing in a lot of this discourse is, what can the governments do? What can the public agencies do? What can the energy companies do? What should they be doing? And I'll sum up by saying that a lot of this discourse, by focusing purely on this economic modes of participation, have disregarded the role of, if we use the analogy I use about the election, 49% of the population, probably far larger. Those who are not middle class, middle-aged white men, no hair. Those who can't afford, those who don't have the agency, those who can't engage in our middle-class utopian idea of what being an energy citizenship is. Thank you.
Thanks, Niall. Yes, but it's complicated. Thanks for complicating it for us. Great. All right, so then we'll go to George, where George will be presenting us in some ways a summary of some of the things that we've discussed through a platform that's been developed in a Horizon project called Include, also a project I'm involved in, where he will share with us how do we make sense of all the information and knowledge that has been gathered about energy citizenship. So it's another mode of engaging with the topic. And I'll send it over to you.
Thank you, Bin. And it's also something to make it a bit more interactive. So we have a video, but before we play the video of the platform, I'll just want to make an introduction first on what we wanted to make. And like all this that Niall said, all this that our speakers have mentioned, is knowledge that we try to capture through this project, Include, through other projects, but we want to make it also actionable and usable by not only academics, but also policymakers, citizens, and other stakeholders. And this platform as an idea came in order to make this knowledge actionable. And the first thing we wanted to see is like how to design it. We made a research study about this because a lot of Horizon projects have such platforms. And we want to see what stakeholders are looking for when they're looking for such platforms. I know I'm changing a bit the subject, but you will see a bit where it goes to in a bit. What you find out is that people, the stakeholders want for such platforms like an explanation of in an easy way of different concepts from academia. They also want transparency, to know where this information is coming from, and they also want the information to be there, to be available, to be findable. And this last part is actually what is currently missing from what we see from our research, is that also we looked at a number of platforms that were already created for climate action and also for citizen action, and we saw that when the project ends, the platform finishes. So what we wanted to create with this platform was to collect all the research that came from on this topic, on citizen engagement, on energy citizenship, and have it in one platform that will remain after the end of our project and will be in one-stop shop, to use the beloved expression, for this topic. If we can have the video, possible to show you a bit around the platform. Yes. So the platform looks like this now. It's already online, and you can find it in energycitizenship.eu. And the idea is that we wanted to curate information in 4 different pathways for different audiences, also for policymakers, but also for citizens and academics. The first on top left is a bit more the academic side, is what Niall, in a sense, mentioned, these expressions of energy citizenship related to energy accessibility, consumption, production, and governance. And here you can also see on the right the different expressions, like, for example, the citizen litigator. This all came as an idea so that the knowledge would stay after the end of the project, and it's not only our project, it's also collecting information from other projects. This is a second part, which is about energy communities and energy initiatives in general. So we want to show examples based on our research, and it's not only showing the type of technologies that are used there, but also the goals and the planned impacts and the actual impacts of these initiatives. Another aspect we want to bring is the human aspect, like our colleagues that generate all this research did interviews as well. And so in this platform, we also have quotes from the different communities. So to capture a bit the struggle of the people that create these platforms, these initiatives, and what they thinking should be their impact. Then we also have like a section on impacts themselves. This is mostly based on a modeling study that we did on local impacts on energy citizenship. And the final one is on resources on how to create your own energy initiative. You can visit the platform. It's already online in energycitizenship.eu. You can explore it and let us know of your feedback. But yeah, as I said, is the main idea for this knowledge to stay there, so that it will not be finished when the project is finished. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, George. So it's a manifestation of a lot of the discussions that we've had. What could we do with a tangible product to actually make some of these discussions also available to a wider audience? So great. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for very clearly and insightfully explaining where they're coming from in terms of the statement that we presented. So now for the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to see if we can engage in a discussion about what we've discussed. So what I hear are basically 4 or 5 flavors of yes, but. The buts are different, but they are all various complications of seeing the potential of citizens in engaging in that transformation and possible barriers to that, and potentially barriers from some of our speakers that really might stop it dead in the tracks. So I'm going to give you 2 options and see which one you pick. Either choose a perspective from a fellow speaker that you disagree with and just hash it out. Or if you would rather prefer I'll give you the safe route, which is, what do you think, given all of what you've heard so far, what is the future of energy citizenship? And what can we do, all of us in where we are, to ensure that future, or to ask questions, or to build the pathway to that future in a more solid way? So I will just open this up to the panelists, and I'll start with Arthur. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. I'm going to do a hybrid of your 2 suggestions,
okay, great.
Actually. So, I mean, for me, and I think for us as ICLEI, as an association of local and regional governments for sustainability, I think, for us it's important that energy citizenship can be driven by the citizens themselves, but we also want to hammer down the point that energy citizenship can also be enabled by other actors. Yeah. So again, what I said earlier, the fact that not all citizens in Europe, and I think we have the empirical evidence to show that, are willing to invest extreme amounts of time to become an energy citizen. This means that you can still make people essentially energy citizens, or encourage them to take at least some part, without necessarily asking them to do all the work. That's why from our side, I think we have a lot of good examples of public authorities, municipalities that take the lead in facilitating any kind of energy citizen initiative, utility bill assistance schemes. Of utility bill assistance schemes, we have a good example here from the colleagues of Rome, for instance. The colleagues are from the Sun for All and Sun for You project, which is done quite successfully. But also, we see good examples of collaboration between the public authority and the private sector in enabling energy citizenship. So if I may, and it's not always black and white. Sometimes I feel when we talk about energy citizenship, and certainly when I make some points about it, I feel the discussion always very quickly tends to shift into this discussion of, well, it's either the citizen or it's the private sector. It's like this us versus them kind of debate. And I think this is very, very old-fashioned. It also doesn't really help, in my opinion at least, to drive us forward to a fast deployment of renewables, when the ultimate aim is mitigating climate change and making sure that energy prices stay low. And to give an example, there is an energy cooperative, and I tend to refer to energy communities a bit more than to other schemes, because these tend to be the most obvious kind of initiatives in terms of energy citizenship that most people think of. There's an example in the Netherlands of a cooperative that, because it is a cooperative, it receives from the state a support for the electricity they generate. because it is a social enterprise, it receives a fund from the municipality because it's a social enterprise. It wants to reduce the energy cost of the citizen. Citizens are of those that struggle with energy poverty. Citizens are able to become a member of the energy cooperative. They become active energy citizens. They can participate in the governance. But because the municipality receives these additional funding from the public authority and the state, citizens are not necessarily required to make the initial investment if they cannot necessarily make it. Yeah, so even those that cannot afford it are able to become a part of the initiative. So they become active energy citizens without having to take the money in the hand and actually do it. That's quite exciting, right? While at the same time, those that do have the capital, that do have the time, can still become part of the governance. They can still become a shareholder or a member of the energy cooperative and become active energy citizens in that sense. And also because the sourcing of capital comes from the public sources and the municipalities and the citizens themselves, the cooperative is actually engaging a private developer to take care of the kind of installation and the management of the asset, the renewable energy asset, which means the private developer also takes the risk without the private developer creating the energy community, which means there's no case of corporate capture or whatever. It's just a synergy between a public authority, citizens, and a private sector energy market actor. And these kind of examples, we really need to go in the future to finally bridge this gap between us versus them, between like local citizens versus companies and all of that. This, in some certain contexts, it might have its relevance, but I think honestly, based on a lot of empirical evidence that we see, is that there sometimes really is a need for more examples, the one I just mentioned, to really emphasize that energy citizenship can be enabled in so many different ways by the engagement of all of us, and it's really not a black and white debate. That's what I want to say. I want to say that once and for all.
Thank you. I think that's very clear. I wonder, maybe I go to Chris, because I mean, this idea of, because I think there is, you also alluded to it in your opening statement, about the roles. There is, we can agree that there's a reality that energy citizens, energy citizenship can be driven by citizens themselves, but it has to be enabled by others around them. And the question is how. I think the first statement we agree with, but how. So I wonder, Chris, how do you respond to what Arthur has said?
I think, Bingbing, you smelled blood and you said, let's go for it. No, I think we largely agree, I think, in the sense that they shouldn't be called energy communities, right? It's a different thing. So in that sense, yes, people can organize in different ways. I think after these very traumatic 3 years, after the invasion of Ukraine, where we had this extreme greedflation happening because the suppliers were raking in billions in profits with the pretext of they were buying electricity so cheaply and selling it so expensively. Like we're seeing it now in Greece all over spring. There were hours during the day where electricity, like the wholesale supply of electricity, costed €0 because there was so much solar energy, but the suppliers still kept hiking the prices every month, and it was getting more and more expensive, despite the weather actually getting sunnier and sunnier. So the level of greed of private suppliers it's beyond me. So really, I wouldn't trust a private supplier, to organize this energy sharing, and I think that's where. For example, again, I'll go back to the example of EcoPower. They weathered through, the biggest supplier cooperative in Belgium and in Europe, they weathered through the entire energy crisis by providing much lower than market price electricity costs to their members, 70,000 members across Belgium. Because their point was not just to squeeze out as much profit, their point was to tackle energy poverty, to tackle climate change, to really promote renewable energy, but in a way that is genuinely beyond profit. So I think that's what really differentiates citizen-driven energy communities to all these other, let's say, constellations. But let's not make it anymore into like a political argument, and let's try to get into more policy. And you asked, how do we get the systemic enabling factors? Well, there's two big files that are currently being prepared at the EU level, and we should all be aware. It's the finalization of the national and energy climate plans and the preparation of the social climate plans. REScoop EU is doing a big campaign to influence both of these files, to really try to talk to ministries and try to get them to include targets for energy communities in there. So if you're interested, if you're a policy nerd like I am, please come at the end of the talk, and let's get into it. And I think the last thing I want to say is that yes, they're time intensive. Yes, they're a bit boring. Yes, they're a bit bureaucratic. But I think there is something that really sets energy communities apart from just, I don't know, getting a green contract from your supplier. They cultivate a new pedagogy, I think, around energy. They really get us to, I don't know, potentially cultivate post-materialist values, to really sit down and look at what types of energy are useful and what types of energy are decadent, like we were saying in the beginning with SUVs and so on. So really, for me, the monumental transition that we have to do in Western consumerist societies, the only way that we can achieve it is through collective buy-in from the crowd, from the citizens, to avoid, you know, the fascist, extreme right-wing backlash that we're experiencing. And I think energy communities are a vehicle to do that. You know, they can sit with the local communities and design these local donuts, like, what kind of energy do we want? What type of policies do we enact at the local level? I think they're exactly at the right scale. I want to close off by a great interview. Colombia has a new president the past 2 years, and he's super great. I love him. And he gave an interview to The Guardian, to the British newspaper, and he said that this fear by the Western middle classes of losing their privilege of like extreme material access is going to drive a new wave of global fascism. And we're seeing it happen. So I think really, that's the message I want to convey, that energy communities, they might sound like, indeed, they might be more time consuming. Our instinctive reaction might be, why don't we just pay a supplier to do it for us? But really, there is so much more within that, in terms of a systemic pedagogical transformation.
Thanks, Chris. I wonder if I can go to Constant on this issue. There seems to be a tension that Chris just brought up for us, which is, you know, the amount of time it takes to be involved as a citizen to create change. And then the internal motivation and meaning that we get when we do, you know, when we do those things out of our own conviction. How do you see it in the work that you do on the ground, and what have you observed in relation to that fact?
Oh, sorry. Does that make us not citizens if we didn't vote? I think that's such an interesting question. We try not to use citizens at C40 when we talk about our city inhabitants, because it, you know, excludes a lot of people who don't have citizenship, who don't have voting rights, who don't have any of those responsibilities. So, so the kind of tension between energy citizenship, shared or collective ownership, and public ownership, you know, where do you sit on those parameters, and what does it mean for building maybe those different values in society and those different pedagogy? I think it is a very interesting one. But the other thing that brings to mind for me, and I know we started the session by saying, you know, we're not talking about technology here, or only technology here, but you ask what the future of energy citizenship here. I think it's hard not to talk a little bit about technology and digitalization of energy services. Obviously has some potential benefits from a very technical perspective. We work with cities on trying to think more holistically about the energy approach and trying to see how they could be powered by carbon-free energy on a 24/7 basis. And the importance of load shifting, of aggregated load shifting, for example, is critical in enabling that. But it's so exclusionary as well. So many people can't access the right digital services. You know, and I'm not only talking about people who don't have the agency for economical reasons or social reasons. We did some research into people with disabilities. They often are excluded from those type of services for very simple reasons as well. Sometimes, like the thermometer is too high in their houses, or you know, there's so many ways that this kind of movement towards digitalization can be exclusionary. So again, you know, that's why we really believe in the role of cities. I mean, it's one of the trusted actors that can help to build some systems of engagement that are more fair, more inclusive, that can protect some of the vulnerable residents. I'm not saying cities have all the solutions. They don't have all the answers, and they're not the only actors that can do that. But trying to think about those trusted advisors, regional governments, or another one, that's what's really going to make a difference when it comes to those tensions.
Thanks, Constant. I'm wondering, Niall, if you have any thoughts about what the last three comments have been, and if there's anything you would want to add also to the future of energy citizenship.
I have loads of thoughts. I think there's a risk that the energy cooperatives, the energy communities will become like gated communities. They'll be the new privileged elite. We're seeing elements of that already. Seeing elements of some of these gated communities being strongholds of fascism in different parts of Europe. You know, so sometimes we equate energy communities with, you know, all nice things. Sometimes it's not. The decarbonization of our societies is going to require substantial social change and result in such substantial social change that we need the buy-in of the general population. And the only way we can do that is by engaging with them. So we might be able to get to 30, 40, 50% of where we need to go by just, you know, forcing acceptance. We need to build acceptability into it. And that means engaging with the community. It means listening to the citizens. That doesn't mean that you come out and say, right, we're the technocrats, we have the solution, this is what we're going to do, and this is why you should accept it. It means, what's the future going to be? Engaging with them in deliberation, talking with them, walking through the issues. And that's very hard for our political systems to do because we haven't had that tradition. So there are elements of that coming through in various citizens' assemblies, public debate structures in France and so forth that are working to different degrees of success. We need more of that. We need to engage with that. And so the other thing I'd say is we need to put the citizen back at the center of citizenship. That's where he belongs.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Niall. But I would imagine, if that's the case, that you don't disagree. I mean, I'm talking to Arthur and Constant about anything that Niall has said. So might there be a point of difference in how you see that being implemented on the ground?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with anything you said, and the risk of the gated energy communities. I love this kind of approach. I think it is very, very true. We've got examples of cities that have tried to build this kind of inclusivity in the policy development process and the policy implementation process. In South Africa, for example, I'm going to take examples outside of Europe for this one, but South African cities have established what they call just energy transition kind of platforms, and you agree it's a concept that is thrown out a little bit too much, but the idea is that you bring together multi-stakeholder processes with residents, with workers as well. Obviously, workers' transitions in South Africa from a coal mining economy to a renewable energy one is a massive topic. And you build these places for dialogues, and you try to build consensus, you try to build policy decision based on that. Seattle is another example of a city that has instituted, again, I think they call it a climate justice committee, bringing together all kinds of residents that emits advice on some of the policies that are proposed. So again, I think the role of a trusted advisor there is very key to avoid the risk that it gets captured or co-opted by the most powerful in societies. And yes, public authorities, state, local governments, and businesses can be part of the power system that keeps some of those dynamics in play, but they can also be, at the end of the day, we also, we're not only energy citizens, we're also citizens of a country, a region, a city. We can also play a role there in building those regulations, those rules, those policy processes, and again, build inclusivity within them. Obviously the Citizens Assembly have been interesting examples. I agree with you, they really haven't been perfect, but a step in the right direction and a lot to learn from them.
Thank you, Constant. And because we mentioned South Africa and outside the EU context, I wonder, Velena, if you have any reactions to what we've discussed, if you're still there, about how you see that playing out in North Macedonia or in a different context. Oh, okay. Never mind then. Yeah. All right. So I think thank you for sharing your views again and responding to each other's views. I think we now go to what all of you think and whether or not you have any questions for this back and forth that we've engaged in. Do you have questions of your own, critical questions to raise or questions of clarification? And I think that we have the microphone, so you can we can do it old school instead of the Slido. I think you can just raise your hands, I think, and then we will come around and, oh, okay, we also have the new school. We have old school and new school, but whatever you prefer, if you're shy, you can also do the Slido. But any questions? Yeah. I think there's one in the back, the gentleman in the black jacket.
Okay, Sean from Ireland, so I'm listening to you with interest. I'm just wondering if it's the experience of any of the panel that
Yes, Arthur.
Yeah, fair. I mean, that's a very good point, and certainly, I mean, it comes down to ultimately, I think, legislation and enabling frameworks for energy citizenship. And what we've seen in the past, is evidence, and I'm sure this is, Chris, you probably also wanted to talk about that, but it's about like how the support framework for energy communities, for instance, is created on the national level, right? For instance. So in the past, we've seen evidence from Greece, but also from Germany, where basically there was support structure from different government levels, specifically the national government level, when it came to the allocation of auctioning rights, basically during the tendering process, to citizen-led energy initiatives. Yeah, so citizen energy companies, as in Germany they're called, or energy communities, as in Greece, where basically the framework or the criteria to apply to these support structures was not sufficiently, let's say, well defined to exclude those who would in principle have other means to acquiring the necessary capital. So some governments have woken up to that. Germany has changed their new support framework for citizen energy companies to be more closely aligned with a little bit the European kind of directive definition of what entails a renewable energy community. Certainly also Greece has done that. I think they now very clearly support I think mostly energy cooperatives, really, right? So it's really very strongly connected to the kind of international cooperative alliance principles. So it makes it more difficult for actors, other energy market actors, to access the same public support that actually should be going to those, that actually need it. And I think ultimately this entire debate about, whether the concepts, that are addressed at citizen-led initiatives are used by someone else, I think it comes down to having proper legislative enabling frameworks, and these need to be really set in stone, and these need to be clear. And we see that some evidence that this is happening. We also see it on the regional level. So in Germany, for instance, in Schleswig-Holstein, there is also no example from the UK on that. But in Schleswig-Holstein, in Germany, for instance, there's a support fund for citizen energy projects, so not specific energy communities, but citizen energy projects. And they're created with specific strict criteria in mind, but also they are done in a way that makes it easy for initiatives that are primarily run by people in their free time, by volunteers, to apply. So it's also something that you hear a lot now. There's a lot of red tape, and there is no level playing field between citizen-led initiatives and other private energy actors on the market, and that's a big issue, right? So there's good examples of how it can be done, but there has been many bad examples in the past, and these bad examples, in my opinion, have actually resulted in this current discourse that we're having of, the for-profit with non-profit and us versus them. But yeah, there has been concrete evidence of that actually having kind of misfired in the past. But I think ultimately it came down to the legislator or the enabling framework not being good enough to do that. And I'm afraid that's simply what it came down to. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. No one else wants to add? Yeah. It's the end of a long week. It's really,
It's definitely the end of the day. So yes, there is a lot of performance out there. A lot of what we hear from both governments and from other stakeholders is performative. It's what they think we want to hear. A lot of this discourse is carried out with the idea or with the perceived assumption that there's only one possible decarbonised energy future. Of course, there's not. There's many variations of what that might look like. And there's vested interests have real financial stake in what that will look like. So are we going to go for a decentralized, citizen-owned system that will take a lot of the income away from the current incumbents who are supposedly leading the energy transition? So we need to think about this when we hear this discourse. So the short answer is yes, there's a lot of performance out there, not just in here.
Thank you very much. And then now I go to a question that we have via Slido. How can we deliver clean heat solutions to people living in informal and inadequate housing through citizen-led initiatives? Perhaps some examples or?
I can quickly chime in. I cannot be concrete, so sorry to the person that asked, but my colleagues have developed a very comprehensive guideline called Guidelines for Community Heating and Cooling. It's a 100-page document. It's really comprehensive. So hopefully that can be of use. So feel free to check it out. And also just, maybe it's a good pass to say that really all the recent revisions of the Renewable Energy Directive, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, the Energy Efficiency Directive, they really all place energy communities as much more of a central actor to the energy transition. It's what at REScoop we call the second generation legislation. We go beyond just energy sharing. We're really starting to take up much more mainstream space, even in these more complicated activities. So that's another briefing. You can have a look at the second generation legislation.
Thanks. Could you repeat the guidelines that you mentioned, just the title?
It's just what the name says, so Community Heating and Cooling Guidelines by REScoop EU.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Okay, now we have there's a question here, and then the next one will go to the field. This question says, you've mentioned that we risk that energy transition will be fast, but not necessarily fair. Coming from a predominantly male panel, how do you include a gender balance in the discussion about? Yeah, please. No. I think that.
Yes, I've spoken so much, I've gone through 2 microphones. So yeah, absolutely valid question. Energy is incredibly gendered. The way we use energy, the way we interact with energy, incredibly gendered. We have, well, I suppose what I can say is the Include project, which I come from, is led by a woman, Bin, who's here, who is at the end of the day is pulling our strings. It is very important to have not just women and men perspectives, but also look at intersectionally, look at different life stages, different economic privilege, different ethnic backgrounds, particularly those in a semi-nomadic life, so the Romani, Gypsies, the Irish travellers, all of these peoples. So we need to get all perspectives need to take involved. Absolutely vitally important.
Thanks. Yes, would you? Yeah?
No, just to again prop up my great colleague's work. No, but really, she left, but my colleague Adonia wrote this great report. It's called the Inclusivity Guide for Energy Communities, and it's not just a It's not 100 pages, and it's not just a talk shop. It has very concrete, actionable solutions that energy communities can take today to be more inclusive, including, for example, hiring a caretaker while you're doing your General Assembly, which has been proven through case studies that it facilitates a greater inclusion of women in the energy communities, because I mean in the General Assembly, let's say in the decision-making bodies, because otherwise they would be the ones that would have to stay behind while the man would be the one attending the General Assembly. So it's called the Inclusivity Guide.
And just if I may, I think it doesn't only apply to energy communities, but to energy sector as a whole, energy policy making, climate change policy making, policy design. Yeah. But no excuse for us.
Thank you. I think we might have time for one or two at most. So I think the lady in the back in the black. Yes, please.
On?
Yes.
Cool. I wanted to ask a cultural, socio-cultural question, because I think it comes. Oh,
It's working.
This microphone is okay. Yeah. Leaving. I don't know.
Yeah, we have technology problems now, but I think
Okay.
a bit further.
Okay, I'd try again. So, social culture question, energy citizenship, because I think.
Just keep talking. We'll hear you. Yeah.
Good. That in order to promote a real energy citizenship, we need also like a kind of cultural change in how we understand to live together as humanity, if I put it in big words. So what can we do? What can also politics do to increase the social tissue? We need to actually work together, because otherwise I think energy communities, it's a lot about the very engaged people going out there and motivating others. But what do we need in a culture, in a society that is more and more individualized, and people rather stay at home or watch their phones and Netflix? How do we actually, what can we do as a society and politicians to increase the social tissue that we need to get out there and create something together? But it's a big question.
It's a big question, yeah, but it's a great
but I
question.
think I wanted to put it out there because it maybe also requires like this mindset, a societal mind shift that we need.
Absolutely. If I have one small thing to add maybe to that, based on some of the work that we've done in our project and what you mentioned, this cultural tissue or the social tissue that needs to be, well, I'll just say one small observation. In the main difference in communities who have been very successful over a long period of times being engaged in energy, and those who don't, is a sense of self and collective efficacy. So what you say about this tissue, I think we name as being a belief that one's actions matter. And where this belief comes from is manifold. But I think that's a lot. I mean, the learning from the 3 years we've been working on this project, that's a big one. That if you might be able to trigger this belief in oneself and in the group that you're a part of, that it actually makes a difference and it makes sense to do something, then you'll do something. Maybe that's too simple, but it's, at the end of the day, what makes the difference between inaction and action. Yes, Arthur.
Just contribute to that as well. I think from the public authority perspective, I mean, there's many different things that municipalities are doing, right, beyond energy to reach out to citizens and to create this sense of community. Actually, what inspired me, like many years ago, to be active in this field was when I learned about the transition town movement. That was one of the real cool things. And then at some point I lived in Japan for a while and I engaged with transition towns there, and it was really great to see that all over the world, really, in different socioeconomic contexts and cultural backgrounds, people really can be very receptive to this community orientated way of living, right? And it goes beyond energy, it also goes into agriculture and all of that. And I'm really happy to see that even in larger municipalities, this kind of sense starts to develop a little bit, but it's not quite, not quite there yet. I want to say something else, but I think that's it's the end of the day, so maybe I just keep it at leave it
Yeah.
at that with a positive spin.
Thank you, Arthur. And I think there were at least 2 other questions or 3 that we're not able to get to at this session because we're going to try to end the session on time. But we please welcome you to come up to us afterwards, and we can also have a discussion extending the session a little bit longer. But really appreciate you sticking with us and participating and being engaged. I think as a last thing we should do, can we put up the last question that we have? Yes, that's the point. So one last Slido. Your last one for the whole week, hopefully. Do you still strongly agree, disagree, agree, or strongly disagree? Where are you now? I guess we should have put up the one first of all, but I think I kind of have a vague memory of what it looked like. Oh, came up before. Interesting. Oh, this is the academia one. Maybe the that has that changed? No. Yes. All right. Yeah. I think we haven't discouraged you too much. This is the conclusion, and that those of you who are hopeful remain hopeful. And also, I think there's fewer strong disagree. So, yeah. Oh, there's very interesting. So, yeah. We also did not expect that you'd change so much, but the idea is that might we continue to engage in dialogue and in understanding of one another's position, and that there's so many nuances in these beliefs that we have about action and change, and it's probably very valuable to engage in those nuances. So thank you for being with us. It was a pleasure, and thank you for all of the panelists who have done such a great job. And thank you.